Folks, welcome back to the Mac and Mike Show, and we are going to have fun today. And let me tell you why we're going to have some fun. Mike and I usually sit together and talk about what we're going to talk about, and then we decide on a topic. And Mike and I were sitting in the kitchen because it's too cold to sit in the back porch, and we talked about various subjects and current topics and topics of the day and what's going on in politics, and nothing seemed to satisfy what we were searching for. So we kind of reverted to something that we often talk about, which is our religious beliefs. And I happen to be a member of the Roman Catholic Church, and Mike is a Christian, but I think he prefers to, I'll let him introduce that. I think he prefers to call himself a non denominational Christian. So our views are about God are very, very similar, but our views about religious beliefs are somewhat dispersed. And I'm gonna open up the conversation and see where it goes because honestly, we were having such a great conversation earlier that I said to Mike, "Stop. Let's record this. The camera should be going on right now because this stuff is really interesting." So I'm going to start it by saying something that my son said to me today, and he asked me a question. It was an open-ended question, and we were talking about the things that are going on in the world today. Some of the craziness that goes on with gangs and some of the craziness going on in the subways in New York City. We talked about the wildfires in California. And, I said to him, in my opinion, that it's not inconceivable that the wildfires were set by people who meant to do us harm. And I'm really talking about people that came across the border as illegal immigrants, but are really kind of like terrorist cells here in our country. But what my son said to me in trying to solve those problems, the gangs and the subway crime and the crime in the streets and all the different things, he said, would you support a Hitler type leader in America? And my comment in response to him was, it really kind of depended on how you're defining Hitler. If you're defining Hitler as someone who wanted to make the German race great again after the Treaty of Versailles really took away their belief in Germany and made them second class citizens, as somebody who was just trying to restore German belief in themselves in their nation being great, I would maybe so. But if you're talking about the Hitler who was responsible for genocide of millions of people, of Jews and the Polish and the Catholics and all these other people, no, I can't support that. And when Mike and I got to talking about that, it was funny how it kind of spidered out into several different directions. Do you want to throw something in here before I keep talking?
No, you keep talking for a minute.
Well,
You're taking it.
The idea here is that there are beliefs that each of us have that are nuanced differences. And, as a Roman Catholic, I point to the Catechism of the Roman Catholic Church. And as a non denominational Christian, Mike tends to base his ideas and thoughts on the Bible. And my retort to that was, there is no book, including the Bible, that is big enough, expansive enough, all encompassing enough to represent everything that there is to go along with our God. There has to be things that we don't know, that we're not aware of, that we're missing, that we will never understand because we're men and not God. And that leads us to what did John write? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word
was God.
The Word was made flesh and
dwelt among us, and all things were created by through Him. In other words, nothing exists apart from the Word of God, which is the Logos, which is Jesus Christ. So that's where that comes from.
We kind of got into this. I don't want to say debate because we each throw out ideas, and I think sometimes we modify each other's opinion based on what we discuss. And isn't it great that we can have discussions like that? And don't you wish everybody in the world could have discussions like that?
Absolutely. One of the most horrible things, as we have probably listened to atheists in our lives, one of the biggest arguments we'll hear from them is religion has caused most of the wars and killings in the world, and that's patently false. But it has caused enough that it's somewhat true. I mean, obviously, atheism has caused more pain and suffering in the world than any religion, even Islam. So, I mean, but it's a somewhat valid argument. And I've always said, like, I could never quite grasp why Christians in the early centuries, up through the Middle Ages, whether you call them Protestants, Christians, Waldenses, or whatever they called themselves, would kill each other over these
Yeah.
things. It wasn't just, this is a point of education for people out there. If you think for 1 minute it was only Roman Catholics killing people, it wasn't. There were Protestants doing the same thing. Maybe not to the large numbers because they didn't have that large of a presence either. So anybody in power, power tends to corrupt.
The problem is that yes, there were many wars or other terrible things, genocides, mass killings, that have been done in the name of religion, that have been done in God's name. And I guarantee you, God does not want human beings killing one another. That's just not something that you know. But you know, there has to be a, you know, my son referenced to me today when we were talking and debating. He said, everyone says Judeo-Christian values. And he said, there were no Jews in our nation when it was founded. It was Christian men. So I don't want to hear that Judeo, that the Jewish law had anything to do with our Constitution and our Christian beginnings of this great nation. And my retort to him was, well, what about the Ten Commandments? Obviously, that's the bedrock foundation of most of man's law today. I said, certainly you will admit and agree that that's a Jewish law. The Ten Commandments are Jewish. And I said, and oh, by the way, if you want to talk about Christianity, the first Christians were absolutely Jewish people. I mean, there's no doubt about that. You know, before St. Paul started going around to other groups of people, Jews were the ones that became the Christians. They were the believers in Jesus Christ.
Mainly, yeah. Like we said, a few Roman soldiers and others were brought in early on. But
well, yeah,
you're
the
right. The
centurion
majority.
said,
Yeah.
my servant is dying.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
But you're right.
Can you say? And Jesus said, well, let me. And he said, no, you don't need to come. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's faith,
Yeah.
right? That's the definition of faith.
But your point's valid. You know, Jesus, he certainly didn't come out of a quote Buddhist tradition or a Hindu
Right.
tradition. He was out of the Jewish religion and prophesied ahead of time throughout the Old Testament. So,
Well, these are kind of like the pinballs that we do, bouncing off, you know, the bumpers and you know, as they say in the you know, in the song, always playing clean. You know, where would the United States of America be? You know, again, my son said to me this morning as we were debating, he said, I don't believe in democracies. I said, I don't either. I said, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a representative republic. And the founders of this great nation were all Christians, or mostly all Christians. There may have been one or two exceptions, but for the most part, they were Christians. And the response that you get back from a number of people is, oh no, they were deists, but they were not necessarily Christian. I think that's pretty much debunked, isn't it?
for the most part, the difference between a deist and a Christian at that point in our history was almost nothing. They point to Thomas Jefferson all the time, and I forget, he came from was it a Baptist background or something of that nature? If you look into his background,
Yeah.
and throughout his life, he donated to the church. He was a big participant. So, yeah, anyway, within the scope of what we call the church, the Christian church, there are nuanced disagreements. And this would have gone to Thomas Jefferson as well as Mac and I'm sure hundreds and thousands of people out there that might listen to this someday. We sometimes talk past each other.
Yeah.
We don't slow down and we make assumptions. I'm going to say that I'm guilty. But what I've learned to do is say, okay, I may have heard this, believed this, but let me go check again. Let me see where it takes me. My brother Mac here, he from the beginning, I think he was a little shocked.
Be careful when you use the term brother, you know, because as we talked about, Jesus' brothers and sisters, and I'm not truly
No,
your
I mean
blood
that.
brother.
I mean that in spiritual sense,
Yes.
not the physical. But I think the spiritual sense is probably more important than the flesh and blood sense
Perhaps.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Um, so we've had these nuanced discussions about the differences in beliefs, and I think there has to be room. There's, like Max started this out, there's a mystery that some of it we'll never know for sure. I mean, you can hold two different opinions and still love each other and believe that, it's okay that you hold your opinion. Now, the opinions I hold would not allow me to be in the Roman Catholic Church because it isn't the same. And we talked about the two big things, dogma and doctrine. So the difference between dogma is something that you have to believe in order to be a member of that particular religious organization. Doctrine is a general teaching or belief, and it can vary from place to place, time to time, and it can vary throughout history. So, doctrine evolves and dogma essentially, well, it's codified, but it doesn't truly evolve, I guess, is the way you'd put it. So, anyhow, there's many subjects we could discuss here, and I don't know where to begin.
Well, hey, I'm trying this one on for size. Did you know that Thomas Jefferson had a copy of the Quran?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they still have it. His copy of the Quran is still in, what's,
Monticello,
no, the
Library of Congress.
Library of Congress, okay? And somebody had it out recently. I think maybe somebody used it as being the Bible when they took their oath of office.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to put up, see, people don't always remember history. Codified in the Marine Corps song is "From the Shores of Tripoli," right? And people don't know where Tripoli is today.
Right, Libya. Yeah.
But it was northern part of Africa. And what was going on in the times were that our sailing ships, that the pirates from Tripoli were overtaking our ships, taking our merchant goods, and imprisoning and enslaving our sailors. Okay? And to avoid that, the United States, along with many other countries, would simply send tribute to the pirates, that is, try to buy them off. And Thomas Jefferson got a copy of the Quran, and after reading the Quran, what he said was, "We're done sending tribute to these pirates in Tripoli." Because what he understood was Christians will never be accepted by these people who believe in the words in the Quran, because the words of the Quran make Christians, non-believers, second-class citizens and worthy of being either killed or
Taxed.
yeah, so
Imprisoned, taxed, or killed. Yeah.
right, serve as slaves, be taxed. If you can't convert them, then you kill them.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's Thomas Jefferson's understanding of the words he read in the Quran, then that's incompatible with Christianity. And there are not necessarily other books that do the same thing, but when you look at the founding of this nation, I think sometimes people are embarrassed to be called a Christian nation. If you remember, it wasn't that long ago where President Obama said the United States of America is no longer a Christian nation.
Hmm.
Well,
yeah.
I believe it is.
Well, maybe, but just.
Well, we were founded as a Christian nation.
Right.
The majority of the people who live here are Christian.
Well, you and I did a podcast on this subject some time back, too. So that gap is narrowing over time. So, yeah, Obama's wrong. It's not quite there yet. But we are, as Christians, losing influence. More and more people consider themselves non-religious completely.
But the difference between again, going back to President Obama, he was asked one time, "Do you believe in in the superiority in some way of the United States? Do you believe in the greatness of maybe that's a better way of saying the greatness of the United States of America?" And he said, "Sure, I think the United States of America is great. In the same way, I think that the Germans think that Germany is great. In the same way, the English think that England is great. In the same way, Italians think that Italy is great. But I disagree because all of those forms of government they have in those countries, this is the only nation that the consent of the governed is what gives those governing their authority. And it states very clearly in our founding documents that that consent of the governed is required to be the leaders of this nation. And, I think part of that is where my son came up with the idea, would I support a Hitler being in charge of America? Again, how many times have people accused Donald Trump of being Hitler?
Yeah, that's a distortion.
I mean,
See, that's like calling everybody a racist. It diminishes true racism. Calling him Hitler diminishes who Hitler really was. You got to be careful about the accusations you make.
well, when you say "Make America Great Again," doesn't that imply within that statement a idea of America first, right? Isn't that the alternative words they use for MAGA? Is America first?
Yeah.
And is America first a bad thing?
No.
I mean, for so long, Americans have done so much to support other nations and other countries. Is it possible it's time for us to focus on America first for a while? And does that make Donald Trump Hitler if he focuses on America first?
Yeah, that's
Because isn't that what Hitler was trying? I mean, listen, after the Treaty of Versailles, when so much, I mean, not only geography, but rights and responsibilities were stripped from the German people. They couldn't raise a standing army, for example. They weren't allowed to, they had to pay reparations. I mean, there were all kinds of indignities that were forced upon the German people that Hitler's rise was made possible by these indignities that were forced on them as reparations for World War I. Now, put that in American terms. Our jobs have been exported. Our country has been filled with illegal immigrants who don't respect our laws to come in legally. Our young people are being killed by illegal drugs that are streaming across our border that are being sent here probably intentionally by foreign governments. At what point in time does America say, I'm sorry, that's enough. We want our self-respect back?
Yeah. Well, people that do that kind of argumentation, they engage in a logical fallacy. And I see this in politics quite a bit, and I'm so surprised that I know congressmen don't have to be as well educated, supposedly, as senators. But I see senators as well engage in this kind of rhetoric, and it's logical fallacy. It's like saying, okay, here's an example. Hitler put Germany first. Trump put America first. Therefore, Trump is Hitler. That's a logical fallacy. That's like saying, I have a hand. A criminal has a hand. Therefore, all people with hands are criminals. See, it's just, to me, it's just so clear. And I hear Congress people make these kind of arguments all the time. And it just blows my mind away. It's like, are we really that stupid? I kind of refuse to believe we're that stupid. I think it's willful ignorance. It's playing the game of being stupid to get your way because you've lost the argument in a logical theater. So, yeah, so it's been talked about a lot. We got to stop using this rhetoric to cause logical fallacies in comparisons.
Well, but see, logical fallacies might work both ways. I'm going to use an example that's topical because it's going on right now. The wildfires in California. The mayor of Los Angeles took $17.6 million out of the firefighting budget, and she used that money for a lot of what I'll call socially conscious kinds of programs. Okay? So, literally 2 months before the wildfires started, one of the leaders of the fire department in Los Angeles County said, "Listen, we're overburdened, we're understaffed, we're under-equipped. Bad things are potentially going to happen as long as we don't, unless we get some relief and we get these funds." And the mayor of Los Angeles ignored that. And when the wildfire started, there were many stories of fire hydrants without any water and not enough fire equipment, and didn't have the ability to contain the fires because in some cases they just didn't have enough water to douse the fire. Now, would that $17.6 million have made a difference? You and I don't know the answer to that, and maybe it wouldn't have. But talking about the logical fallacies, you look at that and you say, hell yeah, $17 million would have made a difference in the firefighters' readiness to fight these fires. But we'll never know, and we can't prove that.
Yeah, and you wouldn't know by how much.
Right.
I mean, obviously it would have helped some, but we don't know by how much. And there are other, and it's a much more complicated issue than that. It goes all the way up to the state and, water resource management. It goes to not clearing brush and whether that's a good or a bad thing. And the electric lines, whether they should be up on poles or down underground where they don't do the damage. So yeah, it's a complicated issue, more than just one thing. But each thing that you do to fix it to make it better is obviously going to lessen the likelihood of a scenario occurring again in a similar way.
I think it's interesting that the state of Hawaii, not all that long ago, a year ago,
Yeah, they went through it. The Big Island.
Didn't they have similar kinds of fire emergencies, and mistakes were made and people died, and homes, vast numbers of homes were destroyed by the fire, and they're still not right yet today.
Right.
But I think the point that makes is that these decisions that people make have consequences. And going back to what we started with a few moments ago, make America great again. What makes America great, and what should we be focused on? So many of the people that Donald Trump has nominated for his various cabinet positions are receiving so much pushback for their nomination and the eventual appointment. Right, the Senate has advice and consent as to who these people would be,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure that the right questions are being asked. You know, um, it's many of these people that are nominated by Donald Trump are being asked questions that are almost nonsensical
Yeah.
as it relates to their
Mm-hmm.
to their appointment. And is that the kind of advice and consent that our founders had in mind when they said that that these people would be appointed with the advice and consent of the U.S. Senate? Is it theater, or is it making America great again?
Well, from the one side, it's theater, and from the other side, they want to make America great again. I mean, it's just obvious. I only watched an hour and a half of the one with Pete Hegseth, and I couldn't stand to watch the Democrats question him because they were not about policy, really. I mean, a couple times they touched close, but they asked questions that couldn't be answered by anyone.
All right.
And I like the one Republican that came in afterwards and about drinking and having an affair said, how many senators showed up?
None of us could serve. Yeah.
Yeah, to vote in the middle of the night that weren't drunk. And did you ask them to leave? How many senators cheated on their wives and got divorced? Did you ask them to step down from their positions? No. And we go back to Bill Clinton. He didn't say that, but I bring that up all the time. Uh,
Did you see the newest aircraft carrier is going to be named after Clinton?
you told me about that. I thought I heard it on news, but it was on Gutfeld's show, so I didn't know if it was a joke. I thought, oh gosh, that's got to be a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, he made that's right. Gutfeld did make a joke about it. Well, if it's
You-
going to be filled with semen, shouldn't it be called the Lewinsky?
I can't believe you said that.
That's what Gutfeld said. And semen is the proper term for a sailor, by the way.
It's interesting to me that when I saw the questioning that was going on, not only of Hegseth, but the second, the guy they want for Treasury and some other folks, the questioning and the line of questioning that they asked. You know what I thought of?
Look,
Do you remember when the new Supreme Court justice, the latest Supreme Court justice, remember Biden said he was going to nominate a woman of color to
Oh,
be the newest justice,
yeah,
and
Jackson.
which to me almost is really a detriment to her because immediately when she's nominated, there's questions: is she the best nominee or is she just the best, African American female
Correct.
nominee that there? So but one of the questions that somebody asked her that stuck in my mind was, can you define a woman?
Hmm.
There's a whole lot of these gender issues going on in our nation today. And, one of the new current ones is they want to pass a law that, um, you can't be a transgender and compete in certain sports, right? I think basically they're trying to defend women's sports so that transgender men transitioning to women can't, compete and really dominate a woman's sport. But what they asked this woman who was going to be a Supreme Court justice, can you define a woman? And she basically said, I'm not a biologist.
Hmm.
Now, isn't it kind of, I mean, there's so many inane things within that questioning of a, so, you know, why is it necessary to ask that question? Then, how inane is it that anyone can't answer that question?
Especially a Supreme Court justice.
So, but why did it even have to be asked,
Mm.
right? And of course, it had to be asked because today, as this new law that they're kind of, I think they've made it. I don't know if the House of Representatives
Yep, it
actually
passed the
passed it or
House.
not.
It passed the House.
So, isn't it, doesn't it insult our intelligence that they even need to come up with or pass this kind of law? Do you understand the inane sense of we have to pass a law so that biological men can't share a locker room and swear a field of competition with women? You know, I believe that there should be equal opportunity for men and women. I do. And there are certain jobs, whether you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. If you're going to be a CPA, if you're going to be an accountant, and you're going to sit in a room and you're going to deal with numbers all the time, does it really matter whether it's a man or a woman doing that job? No,
Mm.
no, it doesn't. But if you're, doing something that's really into, physical strength, if you're going to be running the crane, right, or you can be running the backhoe, isn't it better if you are someone that has a greater amount of, if you're a firefighter and you have to carry a 200-pound person out of a burning building, do you want to be carried out by a 6'6", 280-pound man or by 5'10", 150-pound woman? And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I'm just saying that there's a difference in physical abilities between those two specimens of human beings. And very honestly, if my life is in danger of fire and I need carried out, I want to get the best possible person doing the carrying. I want to live. You know what I mean? Isn't that just common sense?
Yeah. Well, that's what Pete Hegseth said. It's not that he's against women in the military. He just doesn't want to see the standards lowered. And I saw this firsthand in my own career in the Air
Yes.
Force.
Yes.
And, we had a woman. It was hard to get a woman into our shop, but one came in. And she had to be able to lift 50 pounds over her head to be able to put like an A3 bag up on, pretty high racks. Well, she couldn't do it. But they looked the other way. They said, oh, okay, she did it. She did it. No, she didn't. So yeah, they lower the standards. The standard exists, and that's what Pete Hegseth was pointing out. They sometimes look the other way, and that's even why we carry the 9mm today
I know.
instead of the 45 and the
Yeah.
38. Because when I
Do you know?
started out, it was the 45, and that was a big gun.
Do you know why they have the 45? Do you know how the 45 was? Again, going back to the Marine Corps, I talked about the shores of Tripoli. The Marine Corps were fighting the Mora Indians in South America,
Mm-hmm.
and they at the time the sidearm issued to the Marine Corps was a 38 revolver. And these Mora Indians would sit around all day long chewing on cocoa leaves, right? Getting all hopped up on cocaine. And then when they would run into battle, they were they were high and they were on drugs and they were unstoppable. And the Marines would shoot them 2 or 3
They
times with
keep
these
coming.
38s, and they would just keep on coming. So that 1911, it was, I think this was 1909. They developed the M1911, which was the first 45 caliber sidearm that was issued to the military. Guess what happens when you shoot a Marlin
Yeah.
Indian with a 45
Guess what
caliber?
happens when you shoot anyone with a 45, or if you're a baby eagle or an
They
eagle?
don't keep coming.
You don't, even if you just wing the guy, he's gone down.
Yeah, they don't keep coming. So that's how we had the 45, and yeah, the 9 millimeter, that was a surprise to me, but
Yeah.
that's what happens.
Unload the whole clip into somebody and you may
Again,
not kill him.
the lowered standard. I mean, if you were in a fight, what do you want? 45 or the 9?
Give me the 45. I love that weapon,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. I had to qualify with a 45.
Yeah, that was my
Yeah.
first weapon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting really sidetracked, I guess.
But
that's
see, I
okay. That's
promised
what-
it was going to be a fun
Yeah,
conversation with no boundaries.
No, there's no boundaries at all.
Yeah.
You know, next time we come back, we'll have to get a little more focused on some of the religious aspects, because I think in the kitchen we had some pretty good conversation
We did.
that
Well,
we
let's
kind of
get-
missed here, and there's not enough time to really catch up now.
Well, how much time do we have left? Let's go
Well-
there. I mean, what do you want to talk about? Let's, we were talking about the catechism of the church. Is that what we were talking about?
Okay, so one of the things that you educated me on was, because I grew up, my dad's side was Roman Catholic. They say my mom's side was Protestant, but we didn't go to church. So I ended up in a boys' home, and I was sent to a Church of Christ, a Protestant church, because you had to attend church. And I wasn't a Christian until I was 29, but I was educated. I studied world religions. And, at some point throughout my walk, which is too long to go into, we'd be here for hours, I came to the conclusion, if you believe in the same Jesus Christ I do, you're my brother. And that's why I got into this. I'm non-denominational. I think denominations are wrong. God doesn't want them. He wants us to be one church. But it's mentioned too that, the eye is not the ear is not the mouth is not the hand, that we're a body. And the bodies, the appendages, the eyes, the ears, we all have different functions. So, we may be stronger in one area than another, weaker and, not as useful in a given situation in another. And that's a representative of the body of Christ. Put us all together and unite us, and man, we're super powerful. But if you start to divide us into these little groups and start calling each other's name, it's what happens in politics. If I go out and talk to my neighbor who's a far left Democrat, we're going to have impossible discussions on politics. But if she needed me, I needed her. She brought me leftover prime rib the day after Christmas, knowing I was sitting here alone.
Yeah.
See, but she hates me in the political realm, but loves me as a Christian,
As a neighbor.
as a neighbor. She's also
Well, I've endured, as a Roman Catholic, I've endured being ostracized by a number of different Christian denominations. I've been called a lot of things, including papist and all different kinds of derogatory terms that people have, because they don't like Roman Catholics. And that's a shame, I think, because I'm not real sure that everyone understands what a Catholic is or what. But our beliefs are encapsulated in the Catechism of the Church. It's the bedrock foundational beliefs that we have. And, I get friends of mine all the time criticize me about our Pope. Our current Pope is very liberal, and he oftentimes says things that are not necessarily popular. But people don't understand. They think that the Catholic Church is a monothelic organization. Whatever the
Right.
Pope says is the truth, is the rules, and that just isn't
That's right.
so. When a Pope says something, it's really a personal opinion until or unless it's written in one of these letters that are issued that have to be in complete compliance with the Catechism of the Church, and most people don't understand that. But I have close friends who refer to me as a fish eater, because years ago the Catholics used to only eat
Yeah.
fish on Fridays, and is that a derogatory term? I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I'm a Roman Catholic, and I've had moments in my life, times in my life where I questioned my faith. I wasn't sure that that the Catholic Church was the one true church, and I did some investigation, and I come up with, yes, that's what I have to be. And but like you know, I believe that what Jesus Christ said is, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one shall come to the Father except through me. So, you know, I believe Jesus Christ was a real person. I think that's inarguable that he was a real person. There's so much physical evidence from the times, both Jewish and Roman, that this man existed. So then you have to ask yourself, do I believe who he says he is? And you know, one of the many proofs that I often refer to is 11 of the 12, or maybe 10 of the 11, if you don't count Judas. They all died horrible deaths. Only John didn't. And they were oftentimes given the choice: denounce Jesus, and we won't kill you in this horrible way. And none of them did that. And you know, people don't die for a lie. You
Not
know, you
typically.
know what I'm saying? Wait a minute. You mean all I have to do is say that, and like you won't skin me alive, or you won't hang me, or
Crucify
you
me or
won't put
stone me or
crucify me, or yeah,
yeah,
yeah, give me some of that, because
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I'll deny whatever you want me to deny, as long as you're not going to do those horrible things to me. So what one of the martyrs, didn't they were burning him alive, and they came in to, you know, and they said something to him, and he says, I think you should turn me over, I think I'm done on that side.
I don't know. Is that in Fox's book of
I
Martyrs?
I don't know. It's
That's
uh, it's it's
that's
it's
interesting.
hilarious. If it's not true,
Yeah,
I want to believe that it's true.
yeah. It'd
You
be
know.
nice if it was.
Uh,
But yeah, see, there's physical evidence, that certain things existed, and then there's what's called the spiritual awakening, and you can show somebody all the physical evidence that sort of it's an inductive reasoning. It's the old story with a house across the street that's up for sale, and then you see the for sale sign go down. You're not sure, maybe it wasn't sold, but then you see lights on in the house. You think, well, maybe it was. And then you see garbage in it. You still haven't seen anyone. For about a month, this goes on, but before you see the first physical person, you can't be 100% sure, but you can be 99.999% sure that house was sold. So that's the way it is in the way I view the Christian faith. We cannot produce to the naysayers the physical presence of Jesus Christ and say, here he is, have a conversation with him. We can only say, here's the historic evidence that we've looked at. But on top of that, there's my personal testimony, which is then more spiritual because you become a changed person. Now, there's people that are converts to every religion that will say that they changed from this to that in a spiritual sense. And I'm not saying that they didn't. But you combine the two, which makes more sense, both physically and spiritually. And I came to the conclusion it was Jesus Christ. I did not become a Christian until I was 29. I studied world religions. It just hit me one day. I mean, I can say it was like an instant conversion. And we don't have enough time to go into all this. We could sit here and talk for a couple hours about that. But again, it was a long journey, and I respect and understand people that don't believe the same as I do. I'll talk to an atheist or an agnostic, and I'm not going to castigate them, I'm not going to belittle them. Why? That was me. Now, there's two kinds of agnostics and atheists: ordinary and ornery. The
Ordinary, I
ordinary,
like that.
yeah, the ordinary one you can have a conversation with. The ornery one was like I used to be. I used to just dig at Christians and just try and find all the flaws, and I wanted to have an argument with them just to make them seem foolish because I thought I was intellectually superior to those people because they had to be, lying to themselves. So, yeah, I was a pretty bad character. I was kind of like Paul. I didn't kill anybody, I didn't stone anybody to death, but I was chasing down Christians just to have an argument with them. But sometimes those that you fight with the most uh, are the ones that win you over because sometimes they don't fight back with the same ferocity that you go after them with. And over time, you ask yourself, why? Why are they being so kind to me? Why are they being so gentle?
Yeah.
Why are they being so darn understanding?
So nice.
So nice. I have it, those Christians. And I've often said, now I run the website, The Bible Answers, and people say, okay, Mike, you're more of a Protestant because, you focus everything on the Bible. And I say, no, the subtitle is The Bible Answers Many of Life's Questions. As Max said, there is no book, even the Bible says that too, there's no book that can contain all the acts of Jesus Christ, let alone all the things in the mind of God. Just can't happen. So, yeah, we have to use our brains. I use the Bible as a foundational level of principles of things that I believe are codified, that these things we're really sure were said. And the Bible itself talks about the disagreements between Paul and Peter. So the fact that we have disagreements today is little wonder if Peter and Paul were kind of going at it with each other. So, and Paul even once said, I'm saying this, not the Lord. So he was even saying, some of the stuff you're reading here is my opinion. It's not from God, it's my opinion. Well, good grief. We all have opinions. So where there isn't like this ironclad, this is actually like irrevocable truth, I allow for someone to be considered my brother or sister who doesn't believe exactly like me. We can go down things like with Mary. We can go down things like with the Lord's Supper. We can go down things like baptism. We can go down the road of authority in the church, like, and by listening to each other, you strengthen your own position, or
You strengthen your own faith.
or
when you're defending what you believe, you strengthen your own faith.
Or you come to a point where you grow and you learn that just maybe you didn't understand everything.
I dated a lovely woman for a while, beautiful inside and out, and she was not a Catholic, but she was a Christian. And we would go out on dates, and inevitably we would have these religious conversations. And I would debate from the Catholic perspective, and she would debate from a non-Catholic Christian perspective. And I always felt after the fact that I needed to apologize for defending what I believed in. And there were times when I felt really bad that we had these debates and disagreements almost. And eventually it got to the point where I said, I said to this young lady, I really don't want to do this anymore. And I think I hurt her when I told her that I didn't want to meet and be friendly and have dinner dates and that kind of stuff. But it as strange as it may seem, it was mentally draining for me. Not the debate itself, but the frequency of the debate, because it happened every time. Maybe because I think in her heart she didn't believe that Roman Catholics were Christians, and she wanted desperately for me to be a Christian. And I'm not so certain I was trying to convince her to be a Catholic. Perhaps I was in my acts, if not in my thoughts. Um, but I would be mentally drained and mentally exhausted from these debates. And as I said, at the end of it, when we separated and went our own ways, I felt like I needed to apologize. And I hated feeling that way. So, eventually we just kind of broke it off, and we haven't seen each other. I'm sure she's still, the same terrific person she was, but we just don't see each other anymore. And that's the kind of thing that sometimes these religious differences cause, even if it's unintentional, and even if it's not necessarily a happy thing. And that's a shame, you know, because you and I, while we certainly believe in nuanced differences, we both believe Jesus Christ is who he said he was. And we can meet on that plane. And Mike, very honestly, you and I have these religious debates of what's real, what's true. And I'm not sure that we change each other's minds. But after our debates, I don't feel drained. I don't feel tired. You know what I'm saying?
That's good.
I don't feel like I need to apologize to you.
Never.
And I don't know what it was between this young lady and myself, but I can't apologize for what I believe. We were talking earlier, and you said to me, "Do you love God?" And I said, "Yes, I do." I said, "But more than loving God, I need God." And I said, that to me, and I'm not sure I convinced you that my need for God as a human being, to be healthy, to be happy, I had a need for God to be in my life. And I think that your perspective was that love of God was the higher was the highest and most appropriate way to look at that relationship with God. And I don't want to discount the fact that I love my God. I do, and that love I think is reciprocated, which is why I love God even more. Um, and it's when I say that His love is reciprocated, it's so inadequate for me to say that I love God, because there's no way that I can love God as much as He loves me.
Right.
But I think that need for God in so many different ways. My brother's going through a very difficult time in his life, and what I try to explain to him is you can trust God always, and God will always be there for you. Even if you don't necessarily recognize it or accept it or realize it, God is always there for you. There's no human being, none, even your closest friend or your best friend or your brother or sister or mother or father. There is no person, no human being on this earth that you can depend on to always be there for you.
True.
Yet God, you can.
Yeah.
And that's what I say, my need for God supersedes my love for God. And maybe that's just
Well, they're so close. I mean, we couldn't exist without God. So, yes, everybody needs Him first, because without Him, you can't even begin to have the discussion of love. So, in a sense, I understood what you're saying. Um, and sometimes it might even take me a few minutes to digest what you're saying. And, because communication is not perfect. And, you might go home and later tonight I'm sitting there thinking, oh, yeah. I mean, maybe I'm just jumping to the conclusion too, because the greatest of these is love, faith, hope, and love. But yeah, it's absolutely true. If you say you don't need God, then you don't exist.
John in his gospel, and I don't remember what chapter and paragraph. I used to be able to quote that, but John says, if you do not know love, you do not know God.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say a couple of sentences later, because God is love.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that, and I know how important love of God is. I've come to realize that if I believe built into human DNA is the need for God in order to be happy, in order to be well adjusted, in order to be a productive and well adjusted member of society. And I don't get these people who say that there is no God, whether they're agnostic or atheist. I don't get those people who say, "Yeah, I used to believe, but I don't anymore." I don't get those people who say, "Oh no, I believe in the golden rule, but I don't have God in my life." I don't understand that. I need God. I do need God, and God in my lowest moments, and you and I have shared some of those very low moments. In my lowest moments, God was there with me. And I'm not sure I would have survived without knowing that He was there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even others have said that to me. There's the reason some of these things befell you and I. Somebody said they weren't referring to you, but it's true about you as much as it is about me. Is because if it had befallen someone else, they may not have survived.
Well,
So, God gave us grace and strength.
where would we be without mercy and grace?
That's right.
I don't know, Mike. I didn't intend it to be this kind of a religious discussion, but it was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We kind of went around the world in 14 different directions.
Oh, we could keep going on.
We didn't even talk about Greenland yet, or
No.
Panama.
Well, actually, we did last week.
Or Canada as the 51st state. All of those.
That's what we talked about last week.
I think it's pretty awesome that Donald Trump can direct the conversation of the entire world with just a single word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
I think we are, as the Chinese philosopher said, may you live in interesting times. We certainly are.
Yes, I think
4 days until the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States.
That's right. And I went to the one in 2017, but I'm not going to this one.
Things will be different, won't they?
Yes, they will.
Yeah. How much different?
Boy.
Maybe we'll talk about that next week.
That's right. That'll be an unfolding thing.
Should we say that that's enough for today?
I think so.
Mac and Mike.
Out.
Out.